Purple Daily is daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die.
I will ride with this group.
Seriously, man. Please.
And away we go.
5 days until the future of the Minnesota Vikings is shaped forever. Actually, just for fun, before we get in, what would be like, do you think, what's the % chance they don't draft a quarterback in the first round?
5.
But not 0.
5. It's 95% chance they draft a quarterback, but yes, not 0.
It's above 0. I agree with Declan. It's like, I think it's 5. It's like 5.
They have 2 first-round picks at this current rate. If you're asking me today, I would say, boy.
Is it 0? It's not. I don't think it's 0.
No, it's not.
People
0.
would lose their minds, by the way.
It's not 0. But so far, there's 4. Penix is a possibility. I'm going to say it's like 3%.
Okay. Man, wouldn't it be just? Could we see that almost like the Scrooge, where you get to see the ghost of Christmas past, present, and future? Or if you could just kind of go outside your body and see what would the reaction be if that happened. I don't want it to happen. I'm just saying, like, I'd be curious to see.
Yeah. We're in an interesting position because, if they don't draft a quarterback, people are going to be pissed at the Fillmore. But if they do draft a quarterback, which would be, a ton of fun, and let's say they make a trade with Patriots, right, to take Drake May or something like that, and then they trade their 2025 first, then we're going to say, what are we going to do next year, considering they don't have a first-round pick? But then the best case would be for them to, at some point in time, trade back into the first round. But, this is going to be perhaps, dare I say this, the most interesting Vikings draft, at least first round, that I have seen.
Yes, it's going to be, and we're going to get to a question here just surrounding the crapshoot nature of the quarterback selection process here, which the Vikings are immersed in. But on the subject of draft party here, in 5 days, all VIPs in attendance at the Fillmore, it's a sold-out event, but if you're going to be inside the building, Popped Corn of Minnetonka is going to give all VIPs a Popped Corn sample bag. Everybody, including general admission, gets a Purple Daily flag, one of these Sports Dad flags, to wave when good things happen throughout the draft. So thanks to Popped Corn of Minnetonka. And even though the event at the Fillmore next Thursday is sold out, we've been looking for other ways that we can at least connect with listeners and talk some shop, talk about the Vikings. So we have put together with our friends at 3 Jack in the North Loop in Minneapolis a Purple Daily Day 2 happy hour on Friday, April 26th from 3 to 5 p.m. There's no cover. You can just show up, but you do need to register for a spot so we can have a head count, or at least a rough one, at scorenorth.com/happy hour. Scorenorth.com/happy hour. We can celebrate, hopefully, a successful night 1 of the draft with our friends at 3 Jack. If you want to, you can even jump on and be proactive and reserve a golf bay at the 3 Jack website. Space is limited to the first 200 people who register. So scorenorth.com/happy hour, Friday, April 26th from 3 to 5 p.m. So, okay, Bill Simmons had kind of a funny tweet the other day. And we talked about this a little bit with Thor on Thursday. But he basically said, it's incredible how many hours and days and years and resources and people and thought and conversation goes into the quarterback ranking and selection process, right? Like, this is the most important position maybe in all of sports in the world. This $20 billion league, and these quarterbacks are basically running the league. And we pour all this energy into figuring out who are the best quarterbacks, projecting who is going to pan out in the NFL. And despite that, you wind up with draft classes like 2018, where number 1, Baker Mayfield, number 3, Sam Darnold, number 7, Josh Allen, clearly the best of those 3. Josh Rosen then goes 10th, 22 slots ahead of Lamar Jackson at 32. And then 2017, Bill Simmons also cites, where the number 2 overall pick is Mitch Trubisky. Yeah. And then 8 picks later, you get Patrick Mahomes, maybe the greatest quarterback of all time. And by the way, Deshaun Watson goes 2 picks after that. If you're comparing Deshaun Watson, in Houston anyways, to Mitchell
I was gonna say,
Trubisky.
at the time, he was damn good.
Yeah.
That surprised everybody.
Is this all just a freaking crapshoot?
I think that is the easy thing to say because it's certainly not an exact science. But I think crapshoot's too strong because, like, what is the common thread there of not just the quarterbacks, but probably more importantly, who took them? That to me is the thing. When it comes to finding a quarterback, the Bears have been a dumpster fire. The Bears have been the Trubisky pick, and don't forget too. So I think it's more unfair to blame teams when everyone thought, oh, this guy is going to be great, and then he busts or is not good. But Trubisky, everyone said, what are you doing? Like that was an immediate first guess of a lot of people. My guess is that includes teams in the league. Part of the problem here is too, I think teams get bad names because of guilt by association. So like when the Bears draft Trubisky, you probably had 25 teams being like, they're idiots. But everyone says the league is full of morons because they drafted Trubisky.
Yeah.
But I honestly think, if you take Patrick Mahomes and send him to Chicago, undoubtedly he plays immediately. He does not have the coaching. He does not have the time, the preparation. This is not saying he would be a failure, but what's his career arc look like taken in Chicago, as opposed to right now, a guy who we deem to possibly be, the day he retires, to maybe be the GOAT of all time.
Yeah. Well, the Bears were looking for Trubisky to save their garbage dumpster fire franchise.
Right.
The Chiefs had won 11 games. They've been to the playoffs multiple years in a row. They got Alex Smith. They got some weapons. They were looking for a quarterback to just sort of take over for Alex Smith at some point. Maybe not even this year. Maybe it can be next year.
Correct.
And it was a much less urgent situation for their franchise.
Bill Polian, who eventually, he was a guy, I think when Lamar Jackson came out, said that he would move him to like receiver or something crazy. But when Polian still had his fastball with the Colts as GM, and he was a good GM at one time, he's the same guy who said, in retrospect, we should have sat Peyton for a year.
Yeah.
Manning had a terrible first year. Now, he was so smart and so good that he actually probably thrived off of that. But the point is, like, in retrospect, I think people are going to see that Mahomes didn't play for a year and be like, why? And the answer is very clear. Andy Reid also, if you look at his history, and look, the guy is phenomenal with quarterbacks, but if you look at his past as well, he also learned. Like he drafted Donovan McNabb in Philly, and Donovan for a long time was really, really good. But what couldn't he do? Couldn't get over that proverbial hump, right? So like I think that this conversation is really simple to say it's all a crap shot. You don't know for sure, and some of that is true. But I think that this is a really in-depth conversation, and it's why, if you're the Vikings, in my opinion right now, the Kevin O'Connell hire is a smart one, because at least you're giving yourself a chance to have a guy who coaches the position, who, by the way, was drafted and failed. And I'm not saying he was good, but I am saying I'm sure he learned a lot about how he wasn't helped out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it goes so much deeper than throwing a dart at a dartboard. I think it also comes down to a lot of things. And if you look at who succeeds and who doesn't, it is at least partially based on, for the most part, where they get drafted and by whom.
Well, I mean, I've had the sentiment with you guys for the last few months too. Like, the draft is random. I do think it's random. You can't
fully random, but
there's a randomness.
There's a randomness,
but it's not fully random.
I mean, you look at some of the, like, even just the scouting reports for some of like the best play, like Patrick Mahomes. I'm looking at his NFL Combine scouting report from NFL.com, and he is going to drive his head coach crazy for the first couple of seasons. There's no getting around that. Like, you can look at the hilarious weaknesses of guys like Aaron Donald, who also went 12th or 13th overall, who turned into probably the best defensive tackle that we've ever seen. And he wasn't even viewed as a top overall pick. I do think there's randomness to the draft. Yeah, I'm not saying completely it's random, but there is 100%. There is some randomness to the entire thing. In my opinion.
Like we know enough to know with measurables that Aaron Donald is a first-round pick versus a seventh-round pick, so it's not random from that perspective. But once you identify, like, these are the general 20-ish players that are kind of top 10 caliber picks, and then these are like the 45-ish caliber players that are like first-round picks, there's a bust rate within that is a lot higher. And it's not just quarterbacks. It's because we've talked about this before in this lead-up, but offensive tackles have a high bust rate, just like cornerbacks have a high bust rate, But Judd, you brought up Donovan McNabb, which reminded me of the 1999 draft. And it is interesting. Circumstance matters so much. Patrick Mahomes going to Kansas City instead of Chicago. Mitch Trubisky landing in Chicago instead of somewhere else. Now, I think Patrick Mahomes still winds up as the higher upside, more talented guy. But when you look at the 1999 draft, it is pretty incredible how the first four quarterbacks picked basically went according to their circumstance. So the first quarterback was Tim Couch to the Browns, the expansion upstart Browns, who didn't have a roster. They just came back like they didn't know what they were doing, and Tim Couch was just dead on arrival. Hey, we need you to save our fledgling franchise. Yep.
He just broke.
And then the Eagles draft Donovan McNabb, who pans out to be a really good Pro Bowl caliber quarterback for over a decade. Well, yeah, the Eagles had a bad season the year before, which is why they were drafting number 2 overall. But that was not a dumpster fire franchise. I mean, the Eagles had made the playoffs 6 times in the previous 9 years. They had seasons just going back like the 10 years leading up to that draft. Seasons of 10 wins, 11, 10, 10, 11. Okay, 8 and 8, 7 and 9, 10 wins, 10 wins. And then they fell on hard times for a minute. They find their Donovan McNabb, right? And then Andy Reid comes in,
who's a great quarterback coach.
Yep. So it was a competent franchise that brings in the right coach. They're bad for a minute. They get their quarterback. Boom. They're right back to being competitive and competing for Super Bowls. Okay. Then the Bengals are the next pick, and they draft Akili Smith. Now, we've heard enough stories that maybe Akili Smith just it wasn't going to work anywhere. But that franchise had not gone to the playoffs since like 1988 with Chris Collinsworth and Boomer Esiason. They were one of the worst franchises in the NFL, changing out coaches, finishing with 4 wins, 3 wins. And so they were looking for Akili Smith. The Eagles weren't looking for Donovan McNabb to save their franchise. Like, listen, we're the Eagles, man. We're always competitive. The Bengals were. The Browns were. Yep. And then you get to the Vikings at 11. And that was probably the best situation of all of them because you had, at the time, you had Dennis Green as one of the great offensive-minded head coaches. You were coming off almost every year going to the playoffs, coming off a 15-win season. You had Randy Moss, Chris Carter, Robert Smith, John Randall on defense. And you could just sit Dante Culpepper for a full year behind all these guys. And just, hey, dude, just sit on the bench, watch what's happening here, and then you plug him in 2000, and immediately he's ready to lead that team, or if not lead, at least be a part of the team that goes to the NFC Championship game. The Vikings, this year's Vikings, fit the profile of the Eagles and the 99 Vikings much more than the Browns and the Bengals in this example.
Yes. And the thing about Culpepper, too, was everyone at the time was shocked because they're like, hold on a second here. You got Cunningham coming off a great year. Why are you taking a quarterback? Dennis Green, you got to take Javon Curse. Yeah. He's an edge rusher extraordinaire. How can you not? But you know what? In some ways, and this is where I give him credit, Denny was ahead of his time. He said, no, I don't know if he saw Cunningham's downfall coming or what he saw, but, at that age, Cunningham was certainly not a young man, right? And so he gets this guy. It's not to draw a direct comparison, so hear me clearly here, but it's Mahomes like in its thought process, which is, I know offense. I like this kid. I have time to develop him. Yeah. And the thing too, so Declan, what he just read on the scouting report out of the combine about Mahomes is hilarious because Andy Reid identified Mahomes. They traded up, right? who was Andy Reid when he was in Green Bay, the position coach for?
Brett Favre.
Favre, who drove you crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these are all the things. It's circumstances. It's team infrastructure, a term that I continue to use because I think it's incredibly important. But it's also just flat out coaching. Mm-hmm. Like you go to Cleveland, they have no team. They're an expansion team. You've got a coach that just got the job. I mean, Andy Reid was a quarterback artist. That's what he is. He knows exactly what he wants. And yes, he probably watched Mahomes' film in college and said, "Oh my God, this is incredible, but he's nuts."
Yeah, if we can refine him a little bit,
correct.
Oh my God,
I can work with it, and that's where O'Connell, in my opinion, deserves the benefit of the doubt because you now have quarterback minds who can look at this and say, "Okay, you know what? This guy's film far from perfect, but I can take him and mold him." And that's where I think the year not playing, or at least part of the year not playing, becomes absolutely huge. Where it's not, to use your term, Phil, it's not an, "Oh my God, please save us." It's hey, if we plug you in, you're going to become part of our machine.
Yeah. Another thing too, just going back to the Bill Simmons draft classes that he's kind of making fun of, like, oh, see, we think we know something about ranking quarterbacks in this $20 billion league, and look what happens. Well, look at the circumstances. 2018, Baker Mayfield, not a bust, but just that was a Browns franchise that had been circling through quarterbacks for 25 years, from Tim Couch all the way to Baker Mayfield. And I would argue, in retrospect, he did a pretty damn good job given the state of that franchise. And Baker can play a little bit, and now we're seeing him as kind of a journeyman. But we went over on Feedback Friday, the first 15, 20 minutes. Sam Darnold's situation in New York with the Jets is so much worse than most people remember. I mean, we're talking about unqualified offensive coordinators who never got another NFL job in his first and second years. He had weapons he was throwing to that would not even crack the practice squad of this current Vikings team, for instance. And he was just hung out to dry. Josh Allen goes to a Bills franchise with one of the best offensive-minded guys now that we've seen Brian Daboll, right? Like, then they give him Stephon Diggs after a couple of years, and you see the jumps in where he went. Josh Rosen went 10th. He went to one of the worst franchises of the last 30 years, the Arizona Cardinals without Bruce Arians, basically. And I guess that one year that they won 9 games and Kurt Warner carried them to a Super Bowl. They've been a train wreck, and they can't get it right. And of course, not saying that Josh Rosen would have been Patrick Mahomes, but the moral of the story here is it's amazing how much circumstance is the thing that makes the quarterback successful early on or not. Lamar Jackson going 32. Which is a godsend. Dude, if the Jets had drafted Lamar Jackson, we wouldn't be talking about Lamar Jackson anymore. You know? Because
you know what? Baltimore was smart enough too to say, okay, we took you. Now we're going to have to refine exactly what we do. There's a lot of teams that won't. There's a lot of coaches that won't. So, I mean, Jackson going where he went certainly cost him substantially on his first contract, but it was a godsend because this is the thing. If you have the Cardinals coaching for the most part, or like you said, Phil, the Jets, you are set up to fail. And the other problem too is patience. Josh Rosen was probably destined to be a bust, but look at how quickly the Cardinals just punted and said, okay, that didn't work.
We're good.
Yeah.
We're good.
Lamar Jackson, on the flip side, I mean, this is I would say what the Ravens did with Lamar is patience in 2020, 2018 in this case.
Sure.
He didn't start until like Thanksgiving.
Yep.
Which is, you know what? Like, there's some teams like the Packers or the Chiefs that'll sit a guy for a year or 3 years. I think the Vikings are going to probably sit whoever they draft for at least until November, maybe even the whole season. So that's that. There's patience in that regard. Then there's patience in, can a guy have a bad rookie year and you don't bail on him? But the Cardinals are so bad, they're like, oh, well, we're picking first again. Kyler Murray.
Trying, and we need to win. The Bills, to me, when Josh Allen played in that game here, where I think the Bills, they won, and I think they came in as like 17.5-point dogs because that team was bad. But if you guys recall, I mean, that was a young QB with no clue at the time. Mm-hmm. and they were patient with it. He was making stuff up. Like he was just like trying to get by. But instead of saying, oh boy, this is a problem, we're going to have to do something here, they're like, no, we're invested here. So that's the thing. Do you play the guy because you're desperate, or do you play the guy because you feel either A, he can play, or you're going to have the patience for him to make mistakes? You know, Christian Ponder got inserted because McNabb was a disaster. They should have, in retrospect, they should have let McNabb and that team just die together, and then played Ponder the next year. When they put
and maybe it might not have even mattered.
Oh no, but I'm saying you gave him no. That's the thing is, if you give a guy no chance, here's my question: if you give him no chance to succeed, does he fail for that season, or have you set him up to be a complete bust?
Yeah.
It's the Darnold question right now. We don't know. I mean, the Jets might have just ruined him.
Yeah. So the draft is kind of a crapshoot, but also kind of just based on if your franchise is a bunch of dumbasses who are looking for a quarterback to save it.
Yeah.
That's the moral here.
And I do feel like if you give the quarterback a chance, and if you have people that know what they are watching, I feel like football executives and fans, we all think that we can identify like a QB talent. Like, oh, I watched that guy play and I like that guy. I would say the list of people that can actually do it successfully is far smaller than we think.
Yeah. I think Kevin O'Connell is on that list.
Well,
we'll see if he...
We'll find out. But if he is, there's a chance for a Lombardi trophy.
Yes. Dex, tell the audience about our friends at Meadows here before we say goodbye.
Yeah, so we're doing an app giveaway on our Score North app with the Meadows at Mystic Lake. We're giving away a 1 stay and play golf package for 4 each month all season. So prizes include 2 rounds of golf with those GPS carts at the Meadows and 1 night stay at Mystic Lake Casino for 4 people. For your chance to win, all you got to do is download the Score North app, and if you have it already, go to the Listener Rewards tab. You'll see this. And again, 1 stay and play golf package for 4 each month. And then prizes include 2 rounds of golf with cart at the Meadows and 1 night stay at the Mystic Lake Casino. Shout out to our friends at golfthemeadows.com.
All right, that's your Saturday check down here as we count down the days until Thursday's first round of the draft. Will the Vikings already have a higher pick? There's some steam that maybe they're looking to make a trade before the draft even starts. We'll keep you posted. Daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die here.